The Battle of Stamford Bridge, the last stand of the Vikings. In the autumn of 1066, the fields near Stamford Bridge witnessed a pivotal clash that would echo through history. The Viking invaders, led by the formidable King Harald Hardrada, faced the English army under King Harold Godwinson. Against all odds, the English forces arrived swiftly, catching the Vikings off guard. The battle raged with fierce determination on both sides, but ultimately, the Norse warriors were overwhelmed. This defeat marked the end of the Viking era in England, closing a legendary chapter. September 25th, 1066, the day that changed the course of English history forever. Picture this: a single Viking warrior standing alone on a narrow wooden bridge, his massive battle axe gleaming in the autumn sun. Behind him, the greatest army Norway had ever assembled. Before him, the entire English host led by a king desperate to save his kingdom. For 20 precious minutes, this anonymous berserker held back history itself, cleaving through English soldiers like wheat before a scythe. When he finally fell, pierced by a spear thrust from below the bridge, he took with him the last great age of Viking conquest. But his sacrifice would prove to be England's undoing in ways no one could have imagined. The perfect storm of ambition. The year 1066 began with the death of Edward the Confessor, leaving England's throne tantalizingly vacant. Three men believed they had legitimate claims to rule: Harold Godwinson, who seized the crown immediately; William of Normandy, who claimed Edward had promised him the succession; and Harald Hardrada, the towering king of Norway, whose very name meant hard ruler. But it was Hardrada who struck first, and his timing couldn't have been more calculated or ruthless. Harald Hardrada was no ordinary Viking king. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, this was a man who had served as captain of the Byzantine Emperor's Varangian Guard, had fought from the Holy Land to Sicily, and had earned a fortune that was legendary even by medieval standards. His nickname wasn't just bluster. He had quite literally spent decades perfecting the art of being the hardest man alive. When he set his sights on England, he didn't come with a raiding party. He came with an invasion fleet of 300 ships carrying 15,000 battle-hardened warriors, the largest force ever to leave Norwegian shores. The invasion began with devastating efficiency. Hardrada's forces smashed through English defenses in Yorkshire, capturing the vital city of York after crushing local resistance at the Battle of Fulford Gate on September 20th. The Earls of Mercia and Northumbria lay dead or broken. Northern England seemed to be crumbling before the Norwegian onslaught. But Hardrada made one crucial mistake. He underestimated Harold Godwinson, the race against time. When word reached Harold in London that Vikings had landed in Yorkshire, he faced an impossible choice. William's Norman invasion fleet was massing across the Channel in the south, and now Hardrada threatened to tear England apart from the north. Any sane king would have chosen to defend against one threat at a time. Harold chose to defend against both. What happened next was one of the most remarkable forced marches in military history. Harold gathered his army and covered the 185 miles from London to Yorkshire in just 4 days, a pace that modern armies with mechanized transport would find challenging. His soldiers, carrying full battle gear, maintained a punishing rate of over 40 miles per day through rough medieval terrain. But Harold's masterstroke wasn't just speed, it was deception. While his army raced north, he spread rumors that he was still in London, preparing for William's invasion. Hardrada had no idea that an English army was bearing down on him like an avalanche. The moment of truth. Here's where our story takes its most dramatic turn. On the morning of September 25th, 1066, Hardrada's forces were encamped at Stamford Bridge, 8 miles east of York. The day was unseasonably warm, and many Vikings had left their mail shirts behind as they prepared to collect hostages and tribute from the surrounding countryside. They were expecting a peaceful day of administrative conquest, not a battle for their lives. Then suddenly, the horizon glittered with steel. Harold's army appeared like a thunderclap, banners streaming, horses pounding, thousands of English warriors in full battle gear cresting the hills around Stamford Bridge. The Vikings were caught completely off guard. Many of their best warriors were on the wrong side of the river Derwent. Hardrada himself was reportedly so shocked that he declared, "That is a fair host and well appointed. They must be the king's men." The only thing standing between the English army and complete victory was a narrow wooden bridge across the river Derwent, and one extraordinarily stubborn Viking. The berserker's last stand. As English forces rushed toward the bridge, a lone Viking warrior took his position in the center of the wooden span. Armed with a massive two-handed battle axe, this unnamed berserker became a human fortress. For 20 minutes, he single-handedly held off the entire English vanguard. Contemporary accounts describe a scene that reads like something from Norse mythology. The berserker cut down every English warrior who tried to cross, his axe cleaving through shields, armor, and bone with equal ease. Bodies piled up at both ends of the bridge. English arrows bounced harmlessly off his mail. The man seemed invincible, a throwback to the legendary heroes of Viking saga. But legends end, and this one ended with English cunning. While the berserker held the bridge above, an English soldier crept beneath it in a small boat. With a spear thrust up through the wooden planks, he pierced the Viking hero from below. The bridge was open, and with it, the fate of Harald Hardrada was sealed. The death of the last great Viking king. Once across the bridge, the English army smashed into the disorganized Viking forces with devastating effect. Hardrada, despite his legendary prowess, was struck down by an English arrow that pierced his throat. His death broke the Norwegian resistance like a snapping bowstring. The battle became a rout. Of the 300 ships that had brought Hardrada's army to England, only 24 were needed to carry the survivors home to Norway. Among the dead lay the flower of Norwegian nobility, including Hardrada's own son Olaf. The Viking Age didn't end with a gradual decline. It ended in a single afternoon at a small bridge in Yorkshire, the cruel irony of victory. But here's the twist that makes this story truly haunting. Harold's magnificent victory contained the seeds of England's doom. As English and Norwegian warriors lay dying at Stamford Bridge, William's invasion fleet was crossing the English Channel. Harold's army, exhausted from their lightning march north and the brutal battle, now had to race south to face fresh Norman forces. 3 weeks later, at a hill near Hastings, Harold Godwinson himself would fall with an arrow in his eye, and England would pass forever into Norman hands. The battle that saved England from the Vikings ultimately delivered it to the Normans. The end of an age. The Battle of Stamford Bridge marked more than just a military victory. It was the final closing of a chapter that had begun with the first Viking raids 250 years earlier. No major Viking army would ever again threaten to conquer a European kingdom. The age of longships and berserkers, of raids and Danegeld, of Norse kings ruling from Dublin to Kiev, died with Harald Hardrada on that September day. The anonymous warrior who held the bridge for 20 minutes wasn't just defending his king, he was making the last stand of an entire civilization. When his blood soaked into the wooden planks of Stamford Bridge, it marked the end of the Viking Age and the beginning of medieval Europe as we know it. History often turns on the smallest hinges, and sometimes those hinges are held by a single warrior with an axe, standing alone on a bridge, refusing to yield to the march of time itself.